I Want to Tell You.
Oh yeah, okay.
And it's a song about anxiety, about like whether or not to meet this girl. And so like I love that matches up with like the lyrics. But I've also heard other people that have listened to that have been trained in music, been like, oh, that grates on me. So I'm wondering if that's connected to what you were just saying.
Knowledge influences perception. When we know something about a thing, we look at it, taste it, or smell it, or hear it differently. Knowledge definitely influences perception. So it goes from the top down as well as going from the bottom up. A perfect example of a study that underscores this point was done at McGill while I was there. And they recruited me to be one of the non-musicians because it's so hard to find non-musicians in Montreal. Anyway, musicians and non-musicians in our ability to recognize beginnings and middles and ends of classical compositions. Not well-known ones, because the jig would have been up, but they took some unknown classical compositions that were very, very obscure, and they the researchers segmented these pieces, beginnings, middles, and ends. And I think, as I recall, you look at the laptop, and there were sticky notes, and you just click on these sticky notes, and it would play the sound file. And I got to tell you guys, for the life of me, it was 100% guesswork.
Oh, really?
I had no idea. Every something I heard, I remember thinking to myself, I can imagine that as a beginning. Yeah, I could see ending in that. That could be a middle too. There wasn't one example in there that I clicked on and I thought to myself, oh, that's definitely a beginning. I simply didn't know. I didn't know. Without that formal musical training, I've got no a priori assumptions about how music should go. I know how it does go because I've listened to a lot of it, but I don't know how it should go. So when you ask a beginner, they say all things are possible. And for those of us without that training, when we hear something new, whether it's a new interval or a new sound or a new timbre or breaking some formal rules of music, we're like, yeah, I can imagine that. That could work. Now, it could actually be quite bad for a record producer because you might suggest things that, and I've done this before in the studio, suggested things that I thought were a simply fine idea. And other people later realize, no, that's not such a fine idea. It's actually pretty bad.
Do you mind awfully if I ask for an example? I'm just very curious.
Sure. There was, I don't remember the title of the song, but it was on a Tricky album. And this was, the album is called Angels with Dirty Faces.
Oh, nice. Yeah,
Tricky
I know
and I the studio together, and I was mixing for him, and the way he mixes is he just gives you a whole lot of tracks and asks you to just pick some and put them together. And it was kind of dangerous because we were both non-musicians in the studio making an album. And there was one song in particular where he started it in one key, and then he had some other musicians come in, and they played it in a different key, and my mix blended those two keys. And it was really, really dissonant. And I thought, that's great. I really regret that decision. I should not have done that. I can't listen to it today. And I'd tell you the title if I remembered what it was, but you can find it easily enough on the Tricky album.
That's really interesting.
And I remember Kevin Hearn on the Stunt album wanted to When You Dream as Stephen's vocal over just, this wash of noise in the background. And I was into it. That's what I wanted. But the rest of the band and the label as well, they wanted more structure. So they wanted...
Kevin strikes me as one of the more experimental members of the band, definitely.
Yeah, I've got a nice appetite for that. But to my detriment. It's another good analogy is food. There are some chefs who are willing to try, really experiment with different flavors, but most diners don't want a lot of experimentation.
True.
Anticipating that
very small variations on the cupboard.
Yeah, there's going to be familiar flavors in here, so you can sprinkle on a couple of little things, but don't go making a meal out of really unusual flavors.
That's a good analogy. Now,
what were some of your... Okay, jump in real quick, Aaron?
Yeah, please. I know I'm speaking out over here, so go ahead.
What were... So you talked about some of the times that didn't work out so greatly, but you also brought something to this album, to Stunt specifically, that was very different than past producers, I think, and that you had like that feel, like you had talked about in other interviews, of the global overall impression rather than like the specifics of this chord here or that change there, about how music in general is making you feel and bringing that to it. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of the successes that you had on Stunt that you brought in as a person who didn't have a ton of music theory behind you, but you had all this understanding of like how it made you feel and the global overall impression, and some suggestions. I know you made some suggestions with alcohol on like mixes and fills that you recommend throwing in there, but could you talk a little bit about some of those things that you had suggested that worked out pretty well? Because I also know the band came to you saying, we want this to sell big in America. We want to break into America, and that was your
mission accomplished
focus for this album, and it succeeded amazingly.
Oh, yeah.
I was so grateful that they came to me. That record changed my life. When I first encountered Barenaked Ladies, their music was a bit like the Beatles in that it was top-heavy with melody and harmony. Now, melody and harmony are hard to write, so if you're top-heavy with melody and harmony, you're in pretty good shape. But in the United States, the music that our music that has come up from this country has been, compared to Canada and England and Australia, has been more influenced by the rhythm. So the Beatles were top heavy, but the Rolling Stones were more like a square because they had melodies. But if anything, the Rolling Stones might have been a little bit more bottom heavy because they studied the blues, and rhythm was where they started from. Just like American blues music, and then American R&B and roots music. So in order to sell to an American audience, it was necessary to really focus on the rhythm section. And as I said before, that's something I have an ear for. And to bring a little bit more soul to them and add weight to the bottom, add weight to the drums, and add weight to the bass by yanking them away from what the top line, the melody and harmony and the vocals were doing. That necessitated getting Tyler into a groove with fewer fills.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Rock music goes small verse, big chorus, small verse, big chorus. Bridge is kind of in the middle, bigger chorus, and that's rock music.
Yeah.
But R&B soul music doesn't have that dynamic. R&B and soul music builds ecstasy by getting into a pocket and then slowly ramping. And after 3, 4, 5 minutes, you're ecstatic.
Yeah.
That's a rhythm-based emotional connection to music. So I worked with them a little bit on that rhythm section, and let's just get in a pocket and let's see if we can't just stay there and get that feel, and let's keep that anchor down there in the basement and let these guys drift up here at the top and add those gorgeous melodies and harmonies and vocals. So it was taking them more from a top-heavy pyramid, an upside-down pyramid, and just making it more of a square. Expanding it out this direction.
That's really putting it in a great way for someone who's not musically talented or doesn't have a ton of music theory in me, but can understand it and kind of put to visual.
Yeah, and based on your description of your particular aesthetic, Susan, I think you were a perfect choice then for this album.
Oh, thanks. We know from psychology that there are 3 basic pathways through which people bond to music or get that ecstasy feeling. One can be from the rhythm, another can be from the melody and the harmony, and then a third can be just cognitively. Music can make you think, and that might be lyrics, or that makes you think that you love this song. My first love has generally been the rhythm section. I've grown a greater appreciation for lyrics as I've gotten older. I'm just recently getting into Bob Dylan and Joni Mitchell, which is very, very, very embarrassing because I should have been smart enough to have gotten into them when I was young. I wasn't that smart. I like my Stax and records from Muscle Shoals. I like my soul stuff, my blues stuff. Just feels good. but yeah, you don't. It's not necessary to be great at all three. So that's why Barenaked Ladies had success and will always have success by the strength of their melodies and their lyrics. They're brilliant.
Yeah.
But if you add to that rhythm component, you're just picking up an audience that you might not have otherwise had, and can expand your audience base.
Now, did you know when you, like, because there must have been a moment where you were listening to the playbacks or you, after mixing or whatnot, and you heard 1 week. Did you have any idea how crazy that would blow up, that song in particular?
No, didn't know. But I got to tell you, Aaron, something that I've learned during the 90s, and I know for a fact now, is that when little kids and toddlers like your music, you're in.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Because toddlers are responding to not the cult of personality. They don't know if you're cool or
hip. It's completely unbiased response.
Right, it's unbiased. What they know is, does it have a catchy melody? Does it feel good to move to? And I remember hearing that rhyme, chickadee jolly no, the child, and remember thinking, this will be a hit in the playground. Yeah. And I didn't know hit in the playground. I didn't know then that would translate to multi-platinum, but I actually should have known, because with Gegita, their breakout single was a song called Whoever You Are, which was right around the same time. It was 96. And the reason that song became a hit single was a bit serendipitous, but there was a big radio station programmer from Chicago, big station in Chicago, and she took her work home with her on a Friday night, which was a stack of CD singles, and she had to determine of this huge stack of singles which two were going to be added to her playlist on Monday. So she's making dinner for the family, and she's got these CDs playing in rotation, and when Gegita's Whoever You Are came on, her little 3-year-old toddler just stood in front of the speakers and just started dancing. And it's happy enough to recognize, well, if my baby likes this, my audience is going to like it. Sure enough, she added it to the playlist on Monday. Phones lit up. The rest of the country then added the single, and that's what caused it successful. I've seen that with other examples as well. So, chickadee China.
Who knew? Thank you. That's a great answer. Now I have to ask. I know Tracy's probably going to want to throttle me because I keep going away from BNL. I love BNL. I love the ladies, but like I'm such a music nerd, and looking at Discogs.com, I was looking at all the records of your work here. There's two things that stuck out to me as a music nerd, and one was apparently you've worked with Laurie Anderson.
Mm.
Could you tell me what you worked with her on? I'm curious.
It was an ill-fated project.
Oh, no.
It was ill-fated because not all of the dominoes were close enough to fall and touch each other. But it was Moby Dick. It was a presentation of Moby Dick, and she had done the music for it, and the set was insanely beautiful. Yeah. And the actors that she had singing the lines were professionally voice trained, and that ended up being not quite the right fit for what this music needed. It needed to be a little bit more rock and roll. And kind of weren't coming together, so she hit the pause button on that. This was late 99, early 2000, just when I was contemplating leaving the business. So I was kind of making my exit as she was working with this ill-fated project. That said, what a genius.
Oh, she is. She's amazing.
How fortunate was I to be able to work with her?
I'm feeling a little bit of that right now, just being able to talk to you. So I appreciate that. You've had such an amazing career. Your bona fides are intimidating, to say the least. There's one other thing that stuck out to me, and I want to make sure this is correct. There's actually a small section for vocals for you. So, for instance, from Sign of the Times, you did some vocals. Is that correct?
Oh, Prince would gather warm bodies. Yeah, if we were around, and sometimes there weren't many of us around because it'd be 4 o'clock in the morning and we'd been up all night. But yeah, he'd pull us. When I say us, it could be just whoever was around, whoever was visiting him in the studio, a girlfriend or something like that, or it could be myself. If we were working at Sunset Sound, it would be me and Peggy McCreary or Coke Johnson, whoever was there, and you just get on the microphone and off you go.
That's awesome. And I see, well, it says you were on you did some vocals for The Reality of My Surroundings by Fishbone. Is that correct?
I don't remember it at all.
Okay. I wasn't sure because I didn't see. I wasn't sure. Did you work with Fishbone as like a producer at all, or
No, they were in at Sunset Sound when we worked at
okay, so that may have been some
studios there. Yeah, and the three